Recently, I've been looking back at a few of the reviews that I've done over the years, and I feel like on occasion I made some pretty bad calls. There are a lot of reasons as to why my opinions change on certain games. Now, when I review a game, it's typically when a game comes out, right, at launch. um, Before developers or publishers decide to fix something or patch out some bugs. When I review a game, I review it in its condition at launch. It also depends on what version I'm playing the game. When I look back at a lot of these games I've played, I feel like some of them I either criticized a little too much or praised a little too much, um, just because of hype. And I guess what this video is gonna be about is me just going through. I have a little list here on my lap of games I kind of want to like talk about again that I previously covered before. We're gonna go way back to um, before I even made like legitimate game reviews. Like back in 2013 is when I started doing like rants on games that I was unsatisfied with. These first few games are games that I didn't cover at release, but instead they're games that either I didn't really give a fair chance at first, or games that I played on an inferior version of. For instance, most of you probably know that most third-party games ran a lot better on 360 than they did on PS3. So these first two games on my list are games that I hated on PS3, but then I went back to them on 360 and liked them more. The first game on my list is Two Worlds 2. I gave the PS3 version a 4 out of 10, I believe, back in 2013. I did not like it. The frame rate was horrendous. There were bugs. The fact that the PS3 version, the PS3 controller has mushy triggers, and in a game where almost every action relied on the triggers, was awful. A couple years later, I went back to it on the Xbox 360, and even though it was still kind of buggy and still meh, I did like it enough to actually beat it, and I actually liked it enough to buy the DLC that came out for it. I think it was like Pirates of the Flying Fortress, whatever that was. I think that was like on sale for like $5. So yeah, I liked it enough, I guess, to buy that DLC. I don't think I've beaten it, but I got my Xbox 360 downstairs, hooked up on the living room TV. Maybe I'll go back to it. The second game on my list is another game that I played on PS3. It had awful bugs. Like the optimization was terrible. You used to freeze on load screens, and that was XCOM Enemy Unknown. I think I gave this like a 6, just because of how buggy it was. And again, like Two Worlds 2, went back to on 360, loved the hell out of it. And I gave that like at least an 8, maybe a 9 out of 10. I especially love XCOM Enemy Within. One of my favorite games ever, actually, is Enemy Within. It's basically Enemy Unknown with added features here and there, added mechanics, a new story, um, already like integrated into the main Enemy Unknown campaign. Um, for those of you who never played XCOM Enemy Unknown, or will never play it either, I actually recommend Enemy Within, um, for anyone who loves strategy. For my next game is gonna be Resident Evil Revelations. I gave this game a ton of shit. I did a whole like long ass rant on it. I think it was either late 2013 or early 2014. When I first tried playing it, I did not like it. I hated the controls and how they translated from 3DS and PS3. There was like no button reserved for dodging. Like And to this day, I still don't really understand how to do the dodge. But I went back to it a couple years later, and it's still one of my least favorite Resident Evil games. But it was okay, you know, still above average for like a game. Didn't really care for the story, but I don't remember if I gave a final score for that. I probably didn't, but I'll probably give it like a 7 now, you know. I still like Revelations 2 more. But yeah. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Ah, sorry, I got something in my teeth. I think I gave this game like a 6, I think, or something ridiculous. Um, and I think that was back when I was in the mindset that I was still kind of pissed off at Assassin's Creed 3, and I wanted that to be the end of the series. And 4 4 I liked more, but I think I had strong criticism towards the unresponsive controls. But when I look back at Assassin's Creed 4, now this is actually a game I haven't gone back to. But my reflection on it is stronger now than it was back in 2014 when I reviewed it. It's definitely one of the most innovative Assassin's Creed games. It's actually kind of like a reboot. Like you don't need to play any of the ones before that. The Desmond Miles, whatever his name is. You don't need to experience this story to but Black Flag is actually a great entry point for people who never played Assassin's Creed. So I'd probably rate that like an 8 out of 10 just because it was a good reboot, or a good kind of like starting over a new era for Assassin's Creed. It introduced, well, technically 3 introduced, but 4 introduced like open world naval gameplay. And that was something that I never really seen before. So yeah, my respect for Assassin's Creed 4 is higher than it was back then. My complaints for it would probably still be valid. I didn't really care much about the story or the characters. They're kind of forgettable. Like Ed Kenway, I don't know him. you know. Um, I think I still like Rogue a little bit more. Rogue is basically the same game, only instead of taking place in the Caribbean, it takes place way north. So the area is more frozen. Um, and it's told in a different perspective of the Templar side. I still like that one a little bit more. But Black Flag is a great entry point, and I was too hard on it. The Evil Within is also a game that I have not gone back to, and I'd probably still prefer the second one a lot more, at least in terms of playing the series. I feel like, and this could be because I replayed the first one a lot more than I replayed the second one. The first one, looking back, I think is more memorable because it's more linear. The Evil Within 2 was kind of like a Silent Hill game. It was kind of like open areas, open towns here and there. Evil Within 1 was more like a Resident Evil 4 clone, kinda. It was more linear, so it was easier to play through. It wasn't easier, it was harder than the Evil Within 2. There was a lot of insta-kill enemies, and it was frustrating. So frustrating. So frustrating. Can't think straight. Can't think straight. That little skit I did. And it still is probably really frustrating, but I think I gave that a 6. If I played through it now, especially on the newer gen systems like the PS4, um, I'd probably inch it up to a 7. Um, I'm not sure. Maybe if I played it again, I'd hate it. I don't know. But I have a feeling that if I played The Evil Within again, my opinion of it would probably be a little bit more positive now that time has kind of passed. Now, for the first time in this video, I'm going to talk about a game that I gave way too high a score, and after playing something like Witcher 3, I went back to it and I'm like, I'm just not feeling it this time. And that is Fallout 4. 9.5, my ass. I think I commended the game for trying different things than 3 New Vegas. There are some things that I still really like about it, but I feel like when I went back to it, it felt like it had a bit of an identity crisis. Like it was trying to borrow from different genres, and it didn't really flow well. Like, the like Borderlands meets I don't know, like Dragon Age conversations. What especially pisses me off about Fallout 4 is that they kind of recycled the endings for the different factions. It makes it so that those factions like felt kind of meaningless. The endings were like carbon copies of each other, and that I'm not okay with that. Um, I'm never okay with that actually, and I I appreciate that it's probably like the least buggy Fallout game that I can remember, but at the same time, I think it's like the most unoriginal Fallout game. If I were to go back and correct my score, it's not a 9.5, it's not even a 9. I'd probably give it closer to like a 7. Maybe if I could be more forgiving, like an 8 tops. Fallout 4, I tried it, shortly after in 2016. I just couldn't get into it. I got the platinum, I got the different endings, and I kind of had to grind for a couple of trophies here and there, but I had to push myself to get the most out of that game. Um, so yeah, Fallout 4. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. Um, Now the next game on my list is a game that I still have most of my complaints about it, like it feeling too linear compared to its predecessors, it feeling a little too short compared to its predecessors. This is Dark Souls 3 I'm talking about. The game that was very I gave a pretty controversial score. It shouldn't have been that controversial. I mean, I only gave it a 7.5. It's not like I gave it like a 4 or a 5 out of 10. I gave it a 7.5 because on top of it feeling too linear and, too short and kind of recycled some things from Bloodborne, it was buggy. When it first came out, it was buggy. I'm not just talking about frame rate issues, I'm talking about bugs. It's fixed now. I recently did a second playthrough of it and I liked it a lot. My complaints about the linearity and, it's still feeling shorter are still there. But I gotta say, I mean, despite my opinion of Dark Souls 3, my history with it, and, me still thinking it's like the worst one in the trilogy, I liked it enough that I would at least give it an 8 out of 10 now. Maybe like an 8.5 if I still did decimals, which I don't. But yeah, Dark Souls 3 is a game that improved over time. I never played the DLCs for any of the games in the trilogies. I heard they're even harder than the base games. Um, Maybe if I ever get the Dark Souls trilogy that comes with like everything, I'll go back to all of them again. Hopefully I'll love them just as much as I did when they came out. Deus Ex: Mankind Divided, I gave a 9, and I don't think that deserved a 9. I think that deserved an 8. I did not like the Breach online mode, where, like, if you run out of stuff to, like, progress, you have to buy microtransactions, pretty much. It was bad. On top of that, it probably had the worst story in the entire series. Um, the ending sucked. Deus Ex Human Revolution, the third one, is my favorite in the series and one of my favorite games of all time. And even that game probably isn't a 10 to me. That's probably like a 9 or 9.5. So if I'm to give Human Revolution a 9, I'm not going to give Mankind Divided the same score. That gets an 8. Now for the DLCs, I feel like I was a little too hard. I haven't gone back to them, but System Rift I gave a 5. I'd probably give it a 7 now. I remember me complaining about the short length and like the difficulty spike. A Criminal Past I did not review, but I remember not liking it. and I remember giving it a negative score on Metacritic. I think I gave it like a 4. I'd probably give it like a 6 now. I'm not a fan of the DLCs in any Deus Ex. I didn't even really care for what was the name of that one on Human Revolution? The Missing Link. I didn't really care for that one either. So, A Criminal Past, it had a game-breaking bug, and I kind of got mad. And it does deserve criticism. That's why I would probably give it a 6 and not like a 4. The next game on my list is a game that I didn't want to be on this list, and that's Neo. I gave this game a 10. I loved it to death. The second one, not so much. I played through most of the second one a few months ago, and I couldn't really get into it. It was too the added gameplay mechanics were too cumbersome, and they didn't improve what should have been improved. It's like they took a step back. It was the complete opposite of what I wanted Neo 2 to be, honestly. And that's improved the story. It's still just as disconnected, if not even worse, than the story of 1, which is why I regretted giving Neo 1 a 10 because it's not. Neo 1 is a 9. And it basically falls onto the story. The structure of the story was bad. That's it. That's like literally the only thing wrong with Neo 1 was the pacing of the story. But it was bad enough to the point where like I look back and I'm like, this ain't a 10, it's a 9. It's a 9. They messed up on the story. Period. They got everything else right. It's a 9. It's not a 10. I don't know why I gave the game a 10, probably just because I was really in love with the combat system. And still kinda am. So, yeah. There's a game that I got rid of really fast, and I wasn't a fan of it at all, and that was Dishonored Death of the Outsider. I gave this thing like a 5 out of 10, and I have no idea why. I just remember not liking it. Dishonored is Dishonored 1 anyway is one of my favorite stealth games of all time. I gave that like a 9.5, maybe even a 10. Like that and Splinter Cell Chaos Theory are like the top of my favorite stealth games. 2 not so much. 2 I think I gave like an 8.5. Still a really good game, but it does not top 1. Dishonored Death of the Outsider I did not like. I don't think I liked the main character. And I think I complained about it being a little too short, but it was $30. It was half the price of a full Dishonored game. It was it was a standalone expansion. So that probably should have been like a 7. I haven't gone back to it. Sometimes I think about buying it again off the PS Store, you know, when it's on sale. Maybe I will, but I feel like I was just a little too hard on Dishonored. 2.5, if you will. Monster Hunter World is another game that I couldn't get into at first. I reviewed it before I even beat it. Um, and I gave it like a 6. I was able to finish it with the help of other people. When I'm not with other people, I struggle. The game still isn't really for me, but I love playing it in co-op. So I'd probably give it like an 8 out of 10 when you're playing with a good co-op team, or maybe like a 7 out of 10 when I'm trying to fight alone. It's still not really a game for me, but like I said, it's a great co-op game, Monster Hunter World. But it wasn't good enough for me to be like, wow, like I need to play every other Monster Hunter game that came before it. Um, Kingdom Come Deliverance was another game that I still haven't beaten it yet. And there's a big reason why. I loved playing Kingdom Come Deliverance. It was like a realistic, maybe not realistic, but a really challenging medieval survival simulation where you just play as this 19-year-old kid trying to avenge his parents' deaths, and you don't know shit about swordplay. You can die so easily. You can't save very often. You get hungry. You get tired. You can die from infected wounds. And I loved the foundation it had. I gave it an 8 out of 10 just because I loved the ideas that Kingdom Come has. I would love a sequel, even though I haven't beaten this one yet. I couldn't beat this one because a little bit after that review was uploaded, I encountered one of the worst game-breaking bugs ever. Let's just say that that loses at least one whole point. We're gonna drop that down to a 7, at most. um, yeah. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is a game that I initially gave it an 8 back before I could even beat the bull. I gave it a hopeful 8, and then once I beat that bull, the game really opened up for me, and I fucking loved it. By far, one of my favorite From Software games is Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I platinumed it. I got everything I could out of it. It was amazing. Bring that 8 up to a 9. Um, there were still some bosses here and there that I fucking hated. Um, not so much the humanoid boss fights, but just like weird shit like the bull and the fucking ogre. The fuck is that? But yeah. 9 out of 10. There were some room for improvement. You know, like the music could have been more memorable, or it could have been like just a little easier. There were some parts that were just like, wow. Yeah. But it, like, the combat was phenomenal. It was fast. It was intense. I loved Sekiro. Bring that 8 up to a 9. I would understand if someone only gave it an 8. You know, it's definitely not a game for everyone. It took me a long time to beat, but you know, I enjoyed my time with it. I'm glad that I didn't give up on it. So yeah, Sekiro is a 9. The story was really good too. The story was something that I was kind of like, the story's probably not all that great back then, but when I beat it, I'm like, wow, that was actually really good. Good amount of endings, and yeah. Lastly, ooh, this is a doozy. Shenmue 3. I gave this a 7 out of appreciation from someone who grew up with Shenmue. Shenmue 3 is not a very good game. This should have been a 5 or 6 at most out of 10. Um, I Three things. Three things. The dialogue is, I don't, it's probably intentionally awful, but it's still awful. Number 2, they removed throwing moves. There's no Dark Side Hazuki anymore. There's no Demon Drop. This ain't the Ryu Hazuki style. This is just Kung Fu, as he says it. What the fuck happened in that cave? um, and lastly, why do you all of a sudden need to eat all the time? That's number 3, your stamina bar, which apparently also acts as your health bar. And apparently 100 carrots equals 1 caterpillar fungus. Who the fuck eats caterpillars? That's nasty. Yeah, Shenmue 3. No. Now, what I also want to talk about in this video are my top 5 best lists that I've done since 2012. And like my reviews, I made a few bad calls on this one as well. Going way back to 2012, I gave Game of the Year to Halo 4. Now, I still love the campaign of Halo 4. It's still like my favorite campaign in the whole series. It was a little on the short side, but it made Master Chief have a soul. You know, it made him, it gave him emotion. Like, he's not just like this macho man machine. He actually has some ounce of emotion. For the longest time when I grew up, I thought Master Chief was a fucking robot, like an android or something, because he had no humanity in him. Halo 4 gave him humanity. You know, I loved his relationship with Cortana. Halo 4 had a phenomenal campaign, but that's all there is to it, really. The multiplayer was, It felt too much like a sci-fi version of Call of Duty. I didn't even like the Spartan Ops co-op online mode, whatever the hell that was. So placing that above something like Dishonored 1, no. In no way do I like Halo 4 more than Dishonored 1. Dishonored 1 is my 2012 game of the year, not Halo 4. 2013, I gave it to GTA 5, and gameplay wise, it's a fun game, obviously, but I probably wouldn't place it above The Last of Us. And I probably wouldn't even place it above like Bioshock Infinite. I think I appreciate Bioshock Infinite more than GTA 5. 2015, I placed Fallout 4 at the number 3 spot. I placed it above Bloodborne and Rocket League. That was a mistake. As a matter of fact, I probably shouldn't have even had it on there. That probably should have been like Life is Strange or Rise of the Tomb Raider. To be fair, these are games that I didn't play until after 2015 ended. So, but even then, hey, Fallout 4 should have been down at number 5. And then Bloodborne should have been number 3 and Rocket League number 4. 2016, I gave Uncharted 4 the number 2 spot. Um, Uncharted 4 is another game that I gave too high a score. I gave that a 9.5, and that should have been an 8. That was a height score. I gave it a height score of a 9.5, and looking back, it's not as memorable as, was probably the least memorable of the entire series, actually, except for maybe like The Lost Legacy. Um, I probably should have given that an 8. But yeah, Uncharted 4, I placed it number 2. I placed it below The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine was my 2016 Game of the Year, even though it's only an expansion. It was the best expansion I've ever played. It was above Doom. It was above the 2016 Doom. It was above Mankind Divided, which, to be fair, yeah, maybe. And it was above Dishonored 2. So it probably should have only been like number 3. I do like Doom more than any Uncharted game, actually. Since 2016, I played XCOM 2, and that was a great game. That probably should have replaced one of those games. You know, maybe Dishonored 2, I don't know. 2017, Breath of the Wild wasn't on there. Breath of the Wild should have been on there. And lastly, and most recently, Shadow of the Colossus being on my number 7. Shadow of the Colossus will always be an amazing game, but the remake that came out in 2018 felt more like a remaster than it did a remake. Bluepoint Games, they tend to not take any risks. Like, they don't really remake a game as much as they kind of like recapture it. So basically, it's more like a remaster. I haven't played it yet because I don't have a PS5 yet, but Demon's Souls Remake, I heard it's kind of like the same thing, only with, you know, revamped music and visuals and a few small added features here and there, but it looks like it plays exactly the same as the original, right? 2018, I probably should have replaced that with like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Even though that game was buggier, it was fun. It was very fun, and it was an original product, original feeling product. Whereas Shadow of the Colossus remake, it just felt like you were playing like a recaptured version of the 2005 game. I also probably shouldn't have had Kingdom Come Deliverance on that list. That was number 8. Um, I don't know. I mean, it probably didn't deserve it, but I liked it enough to just put it on there. So maybe, I don't know. But yeah, guys, I think that's it. I think that's going to cover it. I might be missing one or two things that I kind of regret giving, but that's pretty much the gist of it. There's just a lot of games that I either thought they were worse or better than they were. Um, what are some of your games that you played at first and you didn't like, or you liked it at first, but then you went back to it and you know you found some things that you didn't know were there, and your opinion of the game was, you know, not what it originally was. I'm really interested to see what your guys' experiences are with, you know, retrospective opinions of games that you played either a long time ago or maybe even a few years ago. Let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to read them. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.
The Gamer Gods! Fail!